Just days out from Caleb Plant, Canelo Alvarez, all 4 super middleweight world titles. Brian Campbell, Luke Thomas, your morning combat host here, looking to wrap up what we just heard with a press conference that was far less violent, I guess you could say, than the first one in September. But what do you think overall, Luke, we learned from today?
Well, first of all, great job doing the Q&A. I appreciate that. I would say I think both guys are a little bit tired of all the cameras. They seem a little bit tired of all the media, which is understandable at this juncture. We're days away from the fight. They've done the all-access thing. They've done multiple scrums and radio tours. It has worn on them at this point, to the point where they have nothing else left to say except answer questions about legacy and what this means in the case of Canelo for his Mexican and larger Latino audiences and whatnot. It was straightforward, was it not?
It was cordial.
It was cordial.
It was professional.
It was not tense. I didn't feel, but they're not going to face off, right? So
no.
They took that part away, which may have escalated things.
Which you can argue that both ways, by the way, in terms of the entertainment factor or just the factor we've got both fighters here. We've got a fight Saturday night. Let's wait until then. But with that said, on that note, Luke, Caleb Plant said, look, it's been a little bit more of a media fixation, that fight we had, that skirmish. Well, there's a lot to fixate about, okay? When 2 fighters let their hands go so quickly at a press conference ahead of a big fight. Do you feel as we're getting closer and seeing the demeanor of both fighters that whether or not that's going to affect the fight at all is moving further in the rear view?
I just don't see how, if the animosity was consistently bubbling over, if it was a constant theme of their interaction, if it was just ever present where they had to get security and whatnot, at that point I think questions about to what extent being in someone's head or whether or not they have enough professional bearing and composure is relevant. In this case, you have Canelo, who is about as experienced as a headlining professional in boxing possibly can be. Caleb Plant, not to that extent, but certainly not new to a relatively big spotlight that boxing has to offer. I just don't feel like there. I know what you mean because of the first initial press conference. You thought, wow, they're just going to get at each other's throats. But both of them have, it seems like, independently decided to dial it back so that when they win or when they lose, it will be based on skills. Skills win fights in the end.
True.
Not so much animosity unless it's just out of control animosity, which it was not here.
Caleb Plant took home a souvenir from that press conference. You can see the marking underneath, of course, his right eye. That's all finished business for them. The unfinished business is what happens in the ring. So as we get closer, just 3 more sleeps, as the great John Anik would say, until Saturday night. Expectations for what type of fight we're going to see. Both fighters have been short, quick with their responses in that lane. We know Caleb Plant more the traditional boxer, but he's more aggressive than a traditional boxer. We know Canelo, by this point in his career, he can fight any style.
Right.
Are we going to be tactical early and aggressive late? How do we sort of try to handicap ahead of time? Maybe not who's going to win, just as much as who's going to take the lead, who's going to set the terms, and how this fight's going to be contested.
Yeah, if you're Team Canelo and your guy is as multifaceted as we proclaim him to be, and I don't think that's unfair. I do think he can fight going forward. He can fight backing up. He can fight opponents that want to get in close, and he can fight opponents that want to dance on the outside. And he's beaten, to your point on the stage, all of them except one, although, of course, there have been a few, let's say, close-ish fights along the way.
I may have scored 1 or 2 for Gennady Golovkin. Nobody needs to know that.
I understand it. Or Lara, or not so much Trout, but certainly Lara probably had a case as well. But here's the point I want to make. I was actually going back and I was texting you this the last couple of days. I've been going through and just rewatching as many old Caleb Plant fights as I could. I went back and looked at the Uzcategui fight. And in that fight, one of the times where Uzcategui is not Canelo, not by a million miles.
He's aggressive. He hits hard. Does he have the same craft? No.
No, he doesn't. There's not nearly the same kind of footwork or feints or reactive decision-making. However, what was one place where he had a lot of success, at least late? It was in close. And Caleb Plant actually accommodated him in something of a phone booth fight. Now, not totally, not all the time. And in fact, Caleb Plant had plenty of success where? With that left hook to the body or to the head at range. If I'm Eddie Reynoso, and I'm definitely not, but at least one thing to consider, Brian, I do think this is a reasonable argument. I think Canelo has to realize the best work that a guy like Caleb Plant does is when he is at distance, is when he is at range, when he can strike and get out of the way, change angles, move, turn Canelo, be on the outside and dance, right? You have to take that away. I'm looking to see Canelo pressure him into the ropes. I'm looking to see him get super close, forehead to forehead at times, especially later on when both fighters probably begin to tire a little bit. I think at early parts, it might be that Lara-Canelo dance. Again, Lara's a very different fighter, but that kind of phenomenon. But I think past the 6th or 7th round, that fight's going to be like the Uzcategui fight. It's going to get in close and tight. And I think Canelo probably will have the upper hand in those particular situations.
You and I have had the pleasure of interviewing Canelo, whether it be after that infamous press conference or after his media workout, a couple different spots. And he's been consistent on the 7th or 8th round knockout prediction. But he's also been consistent on the idea that the first half of this fight is going to be tough. He understands what Caleb Plant does bring to the table, which is hand speed, foot speed, a boxing IQ. But I think even more, and maybe some things, Luke, you may have picked up in the Uzcategui fight, explosive combinations. Caleb Plant's not going to be forgotten for a one-punch knockout artist, but he can flurry and he can land the kind of punches that you don't see coming, which happened with 2 left hooks that floored Uzcategui. So I think for Caleb Plant, not only do you want to come out strong, you want to come out, try to get a lead on those scorecards. You want to flash that
for
speed.
For sure.
You got to land something of consequence. That, you know, the cliched term of gain that respect. No question about it. If Canelo has no reason not to march forward, you're gonna have a quick night, not a long night, because he's gonna be going to that body and he's gonna be chipping away at you.
I would say a couple things. One, I'm not saying that Caleb Plant lives or dies on the jab in this fight, but what I would say is if Caleb Plant can't early on meaningfully implement the jab, either for angle change, for body work. He, by the way, has a great jab to the body. He starts out with all the time. You know, he gets really low when he does it. If he can't meaningfully impose that within the first 4 rounds or so, again, I don't think he lives or dies on that, but what I would say is that's a very bad sign for him. The other part is about the defense. Now, the Uzcategui fight is interesting because he defends in a particular kind of way, that sort of forward pressure guy, where his hands come up, they kind of block his vision, and he just sort of shells a little bit there. That's not what Caleb Plant does. Caleb Plant Philly shells a little bit. He shoulder rolls a little bit. So my point being is, and neither does Canelo. Canelo doesn't do that kind of thing either. So if you're Caleb Plant and you want to strike a distance, that's fine, but you're not going to get a Canelo that's going to hold his hands up in front of his face to just sort of stay in the pocket with his presence. What does he do all the time? He pulls and counters like Mayweather did on him. How about Billy Joe Saunders? Pull and then counter. And then he broke his face doing it. He slips punches. He doesn't just cover and then wait. He slips and then reacts. He turns defense into offense. If you're Caleb Plant, and I know his trainer is thinking about this, you have to figure out a way to not get caught in that after space. You have to know you have an opponent who will get out of the way of your extension and then make you pay for it. That's a big, big challenge for them in this fight.
One thing that has been a recurring theme about, okay, what does Caleb Plant bring to the table? The boxing ability, the speed, but the mental toughness. That does matter to a large degree because we've seen champions in his spot, an unbeaten Callum Smith, an unbeaten Billy Joe Saunders, as you mentioned, guys that we'd never seen lose before, come in here a bit mild-mannered. I know Billy Joe Saunders talked a little trash.
A little bit at the end.
But a little mild-mannered, and I'm not saying it's as easy as show up, meet the pound-for-pound king, hand over your belt, make a nice transaction, and go home. But in hindsight, when you look back, Canelo's so dominant, he can fight any style. That's how it ends up playing out. So that's why I've been on the soapbox from day one saying, would the September 22nd press conference have been my recommended ability behavior for Caleb Plant? Maybe not. You don't tug on Superman's cape was the old song there.
Right.
But it did establish something that he's here to win. He's here to go after it. Obviously, he's got to prove that on Saturday night. But that by any means necessary. I'm wondering, Luke, if there's a line on that. Because I don't mean a betting line. I mean a line that Caleb Plant can go up to, meaning I will risk it all to win this. But if you go over that line, Canelo will get you out of there a few different ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you get out in front of your skis, you're going to wake up looking at the lights here against Canelo Alvarez, a dominant puncher. I mean, we only had the one fight up there, but, putting Kovalev's lights out at 175, we saw what he's been doing at 168, breaking the face of Billy Joe Saunders and punching the arms of Callum Smith to the point where he couldn't use them. Yeah, I'm going to say he's the dominant puncher of the two here.
I like that he's mentally tough, but you may be mentally tough walking yourself into a knockout. You do have to ration that.
But see, that's why today's presser was actually pretty instructive. It may have been, let's be candid, a little on the boring side, at least relative to the very first one that we had. But, dude, this is why Canelo is Canelo, and in defense of Caleb Plant, the same. What do I mean by that? These guys realize if they get a little bit too heated and too overheated before the fight, the train will come off the tracks. I like how they dialed it back because, to me, BC, I wonder how you feel about this. When when Caleb Plant dialed it back where he still has that smoldering intensity about himself, but he's not raging at his opponent, that to me is threading the needle where you're going to go out there with a chip on your shoulder. You want to stick it to people, the haters, Canelo fans, whoever, but at the same time, you want to keep your bearing and your discipline about it. That, to me, what you saw there, maybe a little bit on the boring side, but I would call that threading the needle.
Yeah, and you want to talk about mentally tough. Look at Canelo Alvarez's history, getting up on the largest platforms in this sport as a very young fighter, just 23 when he suffered his lone career defeat in this building, of course, in the 2013 super fight with Floyd Mayweather. And what have we seen him do from there? Evolve, just get smarter, stronger, more confident, more in control. His poise, Luke, is really, I mean, look, there's an endless amount of good things we can say about Canelo, but championship poise in big moments, to be able to make those adjustments, you've got to be comfortable in there. No one's more comfortable in the spotlight than Canelo Alvarez.
And also, I'm going to tie it into something which is not by itself the reason why he is the things you say, but I do think it actually plays a role, which is Canelo Alvarez. First of all, his defense has gotten just significantly better over the years. I don't know who could argue with that. But more to the point, you heard Jimmy Lennon Jr. say it. He's never been on the canvas. And he's taken big shots from dominant punchers of his era.
Think Gennady Golovkin, think Danny Jacobs,
right.
think,
24, 36 rounds with some guys who know how to land with authority. He's never been down. He's never tasted that, and he has stood in the fire against these guys. How does that not help you to not so much craft a strategy per se, but know when the chips are down, you've got what it takes, the mettle, the physical durability, and of course, the desire to get out there and create history.
That's why if you're Canelo, you can say comments like, he's just another opponent to me. Because in many ways, to be fair, he is. And then in some ways, Caleb Plant is. The history at stake is different.
It's not so much that it's true, it's the right attitude to take.
Yes.
And by the way, Caleb Plant saying the exact same thing, which is what you're supposed to do if you're a high-level prize fighter.
Canelo, as you can see, doing some after press conference rounds with the media there. The red beard looking very trim.
It's well coiffed.
I mean, you could learn a few things about how to maintain a beard from Canelo.
Can I have his bank account to work on my beard? If we can do that, then yes, I would.
Absolutely. Very much looking forward to this fight come Saturday night inside this building. We're going to find out if Caleb Plant does he know something? Because there's that level of confidence that's bordering on overconfidence where you're like, he must know something about himself, about Canelo, about this opportunity that we don't.
I will say one thing about the attitudes of the coaches, and you can see it in their fighters a little bit. The Canelo corner, so to speak, I'm not saying that they're not giving Caleb respect. I think that they are. When they're asked about it, they are, but they're also treating this as something of a foregone conclusion, something of that. Whereas on the other side, there's an intensity about the weight of the moment and also just how much they need this and want to prove this and are just dying to turn some kind of corner that Canelo's turned a couple of years ago. Not this exact same one, because obviously no one's unified 168, but you know what I mean? Those kinds of career milestones. So there was a certain kind of calm demeanor on one side, and it was calm on the other one, but let's say there's a little bit of undertow in that water. Yeah. Got a little choppy there if you're really paying attention to some of the details.
I mean, what was the line that Caleb Plant had at the first press conference with the cut on his face? He said, all y'all out there looking to live what? Did he say ordinary lives?
Believable
lives. And he's looking to do something unbelievable. And obviously, when you look at the betting odds, it can be a little bit unbelievable when you're going up against the pound-for-pound number one, and that is Canelo Alvarez, who just so happens to be the biggest star in this sport. But yet he's fighting for the fourth time in 12 months.
Incredible.
Luke, I'm not sure anybody's unified a full set of 4 belts in a 12-month period. This is, I mean, outside of facing somebody who already owns them, this is a remarkable feat.
It truly is. And again, we should be clear about this. Go back and look at the weigh-in photos or the fights themselves when Canelo was standing across from Callum Smith or Kovalev, which of course a little bit while ago. It wasn't in the past year, but Billy Joe Saunders. Even Avni Yildirim, I think it was a little bit bigger than him. And he still went in there and did what he did. What you want from champions are the ones who dare to be great and also have a reasonable amount of competitive frequency.
Yeah.
3 times in a year is good for me. 4 is extra special.
31 years old, peak of his powers, Canelo Alvarez. Let's see what type of challenge Caleb Plant, the unbeaten IBF champion, is able to give this Saturday. And of course, we've got you covered wall-to-wall, wire-to-wire on Showtime Digital and beyond. You can catch our show, Morning Combat, 3 days a week, breaking down, recapping, reviewing all the biggest news and fights in MMA and boxing across the board. Will be part of the coverage this week. Undercard press conference, of course, tomorrow, Thursday, the weigh-in on Friday. These two fighters will face off for the final time. We'll have a little instant reaction Saturday night afterwards. You best believe that. Luke, you just landed in Las Vegas. You just took in the scene. Any final words on your expectations for the rest of the fight week, on how this feels and compares to what you've been in the past?
I've been to a couple of Canelo fights, some big ones. Soon as I got off the plane, I saw signage in the airport. People were asking me, are you here for the fight? It was just one of those situations where every step of my journey to get here, I was either reminded of the fight or quite literally asked about it. It just sort of goes to show the magnitude of Canelo's celebrity, and I think also the magnitude of this fight for boxing, for this division, and for Caleb Plant as well. If he does what many consider to be not the impossible, but certainly the unrealistic to some, even Caleb Plant would tell you that, we are going to be in for a treat and a historic day in boxing either way, and you can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it in the city. It is buzzing. The fight is almost here. And of course, if you want to purchase that fight, show.com, that's SHO/PPV. Get out in front of that. You want to be clicking that button there a couple minutes before the fight starts. Get that settled and ready now. Make your plans. Get some snacks. Get some friends over, okay? If you don't have friends, just, I don't know, watch it alone.
We'll be your friends at youtube.com/morning combat.
That is all for now here from the MGM Grand Garden Arena. I'm Brian Campbell. This is Luke Thomas of Morning Combat and Showtime Digital. Thank you so much for your time. We will see you this fight week as it rolls on ahead of Saturday. History on the line in the super middleweight division.